We continue now at the top of Daf Tazayin Amud Beis in Meseches Megillah. This is Megillah Daf 16b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara expressed astonishment that Yosef would favor Binyamin. Isn't the fact that Yaakov favored Yosef, that's what caused the series of events which led to Yosef being sold as a slave by the brothers? So the Gemara says, how could that be? Yikashel bo. Is it possible that Yosef would stumble in the exact same thing that caused that series of events to unfold? Because Rava Bar Machsia said in the name of Rav Chama Bar Gurya in the name of Rav, B'shvil Mishkal Shnei Sloi Melas, because of a weight of 2 sloim of wool, of fine wool, Shahosef Yaakov LiYosef, which Yaakov added to Yosef, Mishar Echav, more than his other brothers. In other words, the fact that he gave him that coat more than the other brothers, so Niskalgel Hadover, so a series of events occurred, V'yardu Aboseinu L'Mitzrayim, and that's what caused our fathers to go down to Mitzrayim. So the Gemara answers, Amar Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefes. Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefes says, Remez Ramaz Lo. When he gave him the 5 changes of clothing to Binyamin, that was actually a hint. Sha'asid ben lotzeis mimenu, sheyetze milifnei hamelech, b'chamisha levushay malchus. It was a hint that he would have a descendant. Binyamin would have a descendant who would come from him, who would go in front of the king with 5 different kinds of garments, of royal garments. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, Mordechai yatsa bilvush malchus tchelos v'gomer. Mordechai went and it names all the various fabrics. Now the idea over here is that's why we're bringing this in, because it ties to these psukim in Megillah Esther. While we're on this subject, the Gemara continues to darshan the psukim by Yosef and Binyamin. It says Vayipol al savori Binyamin achiv. It says he fell on the neck of Binyamin, but it says it in plural. So the Gemara says Kamat savorin havolei leBinyamin. How many necks did Binyamin have? So the Gemara says, Amar Rebbe Elazar says, Bacha al Shnei Mikdashim. The reference over here is that he cried over the 2 Batei Mikdash, Sha'asidin Lios Bechelko Shal Binyamin, which would in the future be in the portion of Binyamin, Va'asidin Leicharev, and they would in the future they would be destroyed. So he was crying over the 2 Batei Mikdash, and that's the reference that's there in the plural Tzavore. And then the pasuk says, Uvinyamin Bacha al Tzavorav. It says that Binyamin cried on his neck. What is that a reference to? Bachal Mishkan Shiloh. So Binyamin was crying over the Mishkan Shiloh. Sha'asid Lios Bechelko Shal Yosef, because that would be in the portion of Yosef. V'yasid Lechorev, and that too in the future would be destroyed. And the pasuk over there says, V'hinei Nechem Roos Ve'inei Achi Binyamin. Yosef says to his brothers, you see, and the eyes of your brother Binyamin. What does that mean? So the Gemara says, Amar Rebbe Elazar says, Amar Alehem, he said to them as follows, Kishem she'in belibi al Binyamin Achi, just like there's nothing in my heart against Binyamin, my brother, because Binyamin was not involved in the sale of Yosef. Shalohaya b'mechirasa, he wasn't involved in that sale. So kachein belibi alechem, so too, there's nothing in my heart against you. That's what he was telling the brothers. And the pasuk says, Kifi hamidaber alechem, my mouth speaks to you. It means to say, Kifi kain libi. It means to say, what I'm saying in my mouth, that's what's in my heart. And the pasuk says, Ula'aviv shalach kazos asarach amorim, nosim mitov Mitzrayim. It says that he sent to his father 10 loads carrying from the best of Mitzrayim. My mitov Mitzrayim. What does it mean from the best of Mitzrayim? Amar Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefes, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefes says in the name of Rabbi Elazar, Shalach lo yayin yoshan. He sent him old wine, aged wine. Shadaz zekenim nocha himenu, because older people, they get pleasure from older wine. And the pasuk says, Vayelchu gamecha vayiplu lefanov. It says his brothers came and they fell before him. Amar Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefes. Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefes says, Amar Rabbi Elazar, in the name of Rabbi Elazar, Hainu damri inchi. That's what people say. Talo beidnei sagidle. A fox in its time, you should bow to him. Meaning Yosef was having a moment over here of success. You should bow to him. Now the Gemara says, Tala, why are you calling him a fox? How is he less than the brothers? By calling him a fox, it seems like you're saying you should bow to the fox, meaning even bow to someone of lesser stature when he's in his time, when he's having moments of success. That doesn't make sense. He's not any less than his brothers. So, Ela itmar hachi itmar. Rather, if you're going to say this idea over here, say it on a different pasuk. The pasuk says, Vayishtachu Yisrael al Rosh Hamita. It says that Yisrael, meaning Yaakov, he bowed by the head of the bed. And Amar Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefes, and Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefes says, Amar Rabbi Elazar, in the name of Rabbi Elazar, Tala beidnei sagidle. Again, a fox in its time, you should bow to him. That already makes sense, because now it's the father that's bowing to the son. Vayinachem osam vayidaber alibam. Then it says that Yosef comforted them, and he spoke to their hearts. Amar Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefes. Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefes says, Amar Rabbi Elazar, in the name of Rabbi Elazar, Melamed she'amar lahem dvarim shemiskablin al alev. This teaches us that he said things that their hearts could accept, that were received well by their hearts. And what did he say to them? He said, Uma asara neiros lo yuchlu lichbos ner echad. If 10 candles couldn't put out one candle, meaning you 10 brothers couldn't extinguish me, so ner echad hech yochel lichbos asara neiros. How do you think that one candle is going to extinguish 10 candles, meaning there's no way that I'm going to extinguish you? And the Gemara returns to the Psukim in Megillah Esther. The Pasuk says, La Yehudim haisa ora v'simcha v'sason vikar. It says to the Jews there was light, there was simcha, there was sason vikar, there was all kinds of rejoicing. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda says, ora, when it says there was light, zu Torah, that is a hint to Torah. V'chein hu omer, and the Pasuk says similarly, ki ner mitzvah v'Torah or, it calls Torah or, so that's a reference to Torah. Simcha zeh Yom Tov. When it says the word simcha, that's a reference to a day of Yom Tov. V'cheinu omer, it's like what the pasuk says. V'samachta b'chagecha. Talks about Yom Tov, it uses the word simcha. And the Gemara continues, sason zumila. The word sason refers to bris milah. V'cheinu omer, and that's what it says similarly in the pasuk. Sas anochi al Meseches, it uses the word sas in reference to milah. V'yikar elu tefillin, and v'yikar refers to tefillin. V'cheinu omer, and the pasuk says similarly, v'ro chalame aretz ki shem Hashem nikra alecha. Uses the word nikra similar to vikar, and that's a reference to tefillin. V'yaru mimeka, and they'll be afraid of you when they say the name of Hashem, when they see the name of Hashem upon you. Betanya, we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol Omer, Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol says, Elu tefillin shabarosh. This pasuk is a reference to the tefillin that one wears on one's head, and that shows again that v'yikar is a reference to tefillin. And Rashi over here explains, Ora zu Torah shegazer alein Haman shelo yasku b'Torah. It's actually a reference to the fact that when Haman made the gezerah initially, the gezerah was they shouldn't learn Torah. That's why now they're rejoicing they have Torah. Zeu Yom Tov kimu aleim yomim tovim. They accepted upon themselves because of the nes yomim tovim. Zu milah v'al kol eila gazer. Also bris milah. There was also a decree against that. Imrasecha, the pasuk said Imrasecha zu milah. That's a reference to milah. That's why we're quoting that pasuk. Shenitna b'maimor v'lo b'dibur. Why is that a reference to milah? Because it was given with a word that was like Omar and not with a word that was like Vayadaber. It says Vayomer Hashem el Avram. It says that Hashem said to Avram, and that of course is a reference to bris milah. V'atas brisei sishmor matzino shedavid samach oleh shenemar lam natzeach al hashminis k'shehaya beveis hamerchatz v'ra atzmo below Torah v'lo mitzvahs keven shenistakel b'milah sameach. You see that David HaMelech, when he was in a position where he didn't have Torah, he didn't have mitzvahs, but he was able to see his bris milah, so then he was happy. And the Gemara continues, the pasuk in the Megillah says, Ve'es parshandosa v'gomer aseres b'nei Haman. It lists the 10 sons of Haman who were killed. Amar Rav Ada de Yafo says, Aseres b'nei Haman v'aseres. When you say over the names of the 10 sons of Haman and the word Aseres, tzarech lememrinu b'neshima achas. You have to say that in one breath. The Gemara says, my time, what's the reason for that? Kulu b'hade hadadi nafku nishmasayu. The reason is because they all died at the same time. Amar Rav Yochanan says, Vav de Vaizasa, the Vav in the word Vaizasa, Tzarech lemimtecha bezekifa kimo radio deliverus. You need to stretch it out, you need to elongate it like the steering oar of a ship. My time, and what's the reason why it should be elongated? Kulu bechad zekifa is dekifu, because the idea is they were all hung on one pole. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Chanina bar Papa says, Darash Rabbi Sheila ish kfar Temerta. Rabbi Sheila from the village of Temerta, he darshaned as follows. Kol ha-shiros kulan, all of the shiros that we have in the Torah, nichtavos ariach agabe levena, ulevena agabe ariach. They should be written in a format where you have the ariach, which is a half a brick that refers to the text, should be on top of levena, on top of the brick, meaning on top of a blank space, and you have blank space on top of the brick. In other words, you have to stagger the text so that you have text on top of blank space and blank space on top of text, etc. Chutz mishira zu malchei Canaan, except when it comes to this song, meaning when it comes to the 10 sons of Haman, and also when it comes to the kings of Canaan that were defeated by Yehoshua, sha'ariach agabe ariach ulevena agabe levena. Over there, you have the half a brick, meaning the text, on top of other text, and you have the blank spaces all on top of each other. My time, and what's the reason? Shalote tekuma limhad palosan. The idea is that you can't build a building in that fashion. You can't have it ariach agabe ariach and levena agabe levena, and that's a hint to the fact that they shouldn't have anything supporting them, helping them, and that way they will have a full downfall. And the Gemara continues, Vayomer HaMelech le'Esther HaMalka, and the king said to Esther the queen, B'Shushan Habira Hargo HaYehudim, in Shushan Habira, and Shushan the capital, the Jews killed, Amar Rabbi Avo says, Melamid shaba malach ustaru al piv. This teaches us that an angel came and hit him on his mouth, meaning he caused him to stop saying what he originally wanted to say. As Rashi over here explains, Melamid shaba malach sharei hischil edaber b'loshen kas. In this pasuk, Achashverosh is beginning to speak. When he starts to speak, he's speaking in a language of anger. But then he changes directions and he says, whatever you request, that's what we will fulfill. And the Gemara continues, the pasuk in the Megillah says, Uvavoa lifnei hamelech, and when she came before the king, Amar im hasefer, he said that which was written in the scroll. So the Gemara says, Amar, why does it say he said? Amrami boile, it should say she said. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yochanan says, Amro lo, she said to him, meaning Esther said to Achashverosh, Yayomar bepeh mashakasu b'sefer. It should be said verbally that which is written in this sefer. And Rashi over here has a slightly different text. Tachi Garsin, the text is as follows. Amar Rav Nachman says, Rashi has Rav Nachman instead of Rav Yochanan. Yayomar bepeh mashanichta b'svarim v'lo Garsinan Amro lo. Rashi takes out the words Amro lo. It's not that she said to him. It just means it should be said verbally, that which is written in the Svarim, and now Rashi explains. V'achi perusha. Here's how you understand what the Gemara is saying. Seder HaMikros kachu. The order of the psukim is as follows. V'kibel haYehudim es asher echelu lasos. The first pasuk says that the Jews accepted that which they began to do, meaning they started Mishloach Manos, Matanos Levyonim. They began to accept that as a yearly custom. Ki Haman ben Hamdasa ha'agagi v'gomer. Then it talks about what Haman did and how it was turned around against him. Uvavoa lifnei hamelech amar ma'sefer. And then we have our pasuk where that when Esther came before the king, so then it was everything that Haman had in mind was turned against him. And so now Rashi explains how you understand the psukim. Mordechai kosav aleihem sheyasu Purim. The first pasuk is that Mordechai wrote to them they should do again these customs of Purim. They should celebrate Purim. Ki Haman bikesh la'avdam. The second pasuk is again that Haman he sought to destroy them. And then the last one, Umasha basa Esther lifnei hamelech l'schanen lo. And also that which Esther came in front of the king to beseech the king in order to turn things around. Kol zeh yeyomer shana b'shana. All of this should be said every single year. In other words, that's the Amar im hasefer. All of this should be said over this entire story every single year. Im hasefer, as Rashi says, shetei Megillah ksuva lifneim b'shas kriya. What do you mean Im hasefer? That when we read about it, we should have the Megillah in front of us. The Megillah should be written in front of them when they read it. That's how you understand the psukim. And the Gemara continues. The pasuk in the Megillah says, "Divrei shalom ve'emes." These are words of peace and truth. And the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Tanchum says, V'yamri lo Amar Rabbi Asi, and some people say it's Rabbi Asi that says, Melamed shetzricha sirtut kamita shel Torah. This line in the Megillah teaches us that the Megillah requires sirtut. Sirtut is when they would scratch lines, and right on top of the lines, you scratch lines in the scroll, and you write the ksav on top of those lines, like the Amita shel Torah, meaning just like a Sefer Torah, the truth of the Torah. A Sefer Torah requires sirtut, and so too a Megillah Esther requires sirtut. And the Gemara continues, Ma'amar Esther Kayim. It says that the word of Esther they fulfilled. Ma'amar Esther in Divrei Hatzomos Lo. It sounds like they're only fulfilling the instructions of Esther, but not the instructions regarding the fast. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, it means Divrei Hatzomos U'Ma'amar Esther Kayim HaPurim. It means the fasts and the instructions of Esther, all of that was fulfilled. Kayim Es Yimei HaPurim Ha'elu, all of that was fulfilled. And the Gemara continues, Ki Mordechai HaYehudi Mishnah LaMelech HaChashverosh V'Gadol HaYehudim V'Rotzei L'Rov Echav. It says Mordechai was second to King Achashverosh. He was great among the Jews, and he was favored by many of his brothers. So it says L'Rov Echav, by many of his brothers, V'lo L'chol Echav, not all of his brothers. Melamed Shapir Shumimenu Miksa Sanhedrin. This teaches us that some of the Sanhedrin, they actually separated from Mordechai, because Mordechai was involved in communal affairs. He was not learning as much Torah. As Rashi over here says, Shapir Shumimenu, that some of the Sanhedrin separated from him, Lefisha Bitel Midivrei Torah, V'nichnas L'Sorah, because he was Mevatel Torah, he wasn't learning as much Torah, and instead he entered into the leadership, into the community affairs. And the Gemara continues along the same lines. Amar Rav Yosef says, Gadol Talmud Torah Yoser Me'atzalas Nefashos. Talmud Torah is greater than the saving of lives. To Meikara Chashav Leila Mordechai Basar Daled, because originally Mordechai is counted after 4 individuals, Ulevasov Basar Chamisha, but later on he's counted after 5 individuals, meaning it seems like he was lowered in status, again because he was not learning as much Torah. Meikara Ksiv, originally the pasuk says, Asher Boim Zerubbabel, that they came with Zerubbabel, Yeshua, Nehemiah, Seraya, Re'eloya, Mordechai, Bilshan. So you see over here that Mordechai is listed after 4 individuals, like we just said. Ulevasov Ksiv, but at the end the pasuk says, Haboim im Zerubbabel, those who came with Zerubbabel, Yeshua, Nehemiah, Azariah, Ramya, Nachamoni, Mordechai, Bilshon. So you see over here, he's listed after 5 individuals. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav, V'Tamer Rav Shmuel bar Morosa. Rav says, and some people say, Rav Shmuel bar Morosa says, Gadol Talmud Torah Yoser Mibinyan Beis HaMikdash. The learning of Torah is greater than the building of the Beis HaMikdash. Shekol Zman Shebaruch ben Neriah Kayim, because as long as Baruch ben Neriah was alive, Lo Hinicho Ezra Va'ola, Ezra wouldn't leave his Rebbe and go up to Eretz Yisrael. Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta. Rabba says in the name of Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta, Gadol Talmud Torah Yoser Mikibud Avaim. Talmud Torah is greater than Kibbud Avaim. Shekalosan Shanim Shaya Yaakov Avinu Bebeis Aver, because as long as Yaakov Avinu was in the house of Aver, as long as he was learning Torah, Lo Nenash, he was not punished. He wasn't punished, meaning for not doing Kibbud Avaim, even though he was away from his father. Diyamar Mar, as the master said, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph.